Unfortunately, millions of Americans are woefully unprepared for retirement. In today's video, I want to share with you a few statistics that I think are really important, and then focus on things that people that haven't saved enough can do, and people that are saving well can do to get to the next level. So let's jump in. According to an August 2023 report by the Wall Street Journal, almost half of all Americans have zero retirement savings. It's 49%. And 80% of all Americans have less than $100,000 in retirement savings in tools like a 401k or an IRA. Now, it doesn't mean that their net worth is zero, but it means that they don't have any retirement savings. And for many Americans, the biggest piece of our net worth, which is the value of all of our assets, things like our bank account, a 401k, importantly, our home, our car, the value of all of our assets, less the value of all of our debt, our liabilities. So less our mortgage, less our car payment. So most of us, our net worth is tied up in our home. And unless we're planning on selling our home when we retire, and some people are, but many are not, particularly in the baby boomer generation. It's which I'm on the tail end of that myself. But baby boomers are doing what's called aging in place. And so they're staying in their home, which is one of the reasons that there's this shortage of housing. There's the largest, right? There was this big, they're called the baby boomers. We are called the baby boomers because it was this big population explosion, lots of babies being born, boom. And so, frankly, the baby boomers, my generation, has been buying all the homes and not selling them. So that's part of the issue. But if your net worth is tied into your home as opposed to in a 401k or at a bank account a couple miles away from home, the challenge is, what are you going to use? How are you going to get cash in order to fund your living expenses? So if you look at the net worth numbers, according to the Survey of Consumer Finance, which is put out by the Federal Reserve, they do this survey of consumer finance every 3 years. And this report was released about 6 months before I recorded this. So it's the most recent data that we have. It's as of 2022, but it was released towards the end of 2023. And so if you look at 55 to 64-year-olds, which is the beginning stage of the retirement ages, the median household net worth, so if there were 2 adults in the household, this would be for both adults. It's not just for this one person. But the median household net worth, not, if you're married, not husband, not both spouses, but it's not each spouse individually has this number, but it's collectively. I hope that makes sense. I kind of fumbled on that, sorry. But the median household net worth for 55 to 64-year-olds is a little under $365,000. For 65 to 74, that goes up a little bit to $410,000. And then for 75 and older, that number goes down to about $335,000. So let's do the math on this. Let's do the math on 65 to 74-year-olds. We know that about 70% of Americans from 65 to 70 are retired, and that number goes up to, I believe it's 88% at 70. 88% of Americans are retired by 70. It might be 75. But let's just do the math on that $410,000. Let's just call it 400,000. And let's use a rule of thumb, excuse me, that is 4% of the 4% rule, which essentially says you can take out about 4% a year from your retirement accounts in a portfolio that's about 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and have a reasonable chance of that of never running out of money over a 30-year period. And you can adjust that for inflation every year. So 400,000 at 4% would be 16,000 a year, which is $1,333 a month. Now, if we look at the average Social Security check, which changes every month, but in January of 2024, the average Social Security check in the United States was $1,907. So if we combine that, assuming that this $400,000 was liquid, we would get that $1,300 a month plus the $1,900 a month, which is $3,200 a month, which is $35,000 to $40,000 a year, which is going to be tight for most of us. So now I want to focus on if you're not saving enough, something that you can do. And if you're a good saver, which I think many viewers of my videos are good savers, what we can do to get to the next level for you to achieve your goal. Now, I don't want you to just sacrifice the sacrifice, right? It's also about enjoying the journey. So I do have some people that leave in the comments, they save 30%, 40%, 50% of their salary. And if you're still enjoying life, that's great. But if you feel like you're sacrificing your 20s and your 30s and your 40s in order to be able to enjoy your 60s and 70s, I want you to think about balance, right? It's not just future you, but it's also current you. So, what can you do? The biggest thing, I think, is no matter how much money you make, we have to spend less than what we earn. And surprisingly, almost half of all Americans that make over $100,000 a year don't save a dime. And so if that's you, really look at, what can you cut out in order to be able to start saving? And one of the rules that I like to use is what I call the 50-30-20 rule. And that is, if you're making enough money that you should be able to save something, look at, could you take 50% of your take-home pay, after-tax take-home pay, before any 401k contributions, any savings contributions? So your gross pay less the taxes, could you take that and could you live? Could you have your needs, your rent or your mortgage, your utility, your gas bills, your food, grocery store, not eating out, but grocery store, could you get that down to 50%? And could you get your wants, things like vacation, things like going out to eat frequently, things like the cardboard boxes that show up at our house, could you get that down to 30%? And if you can do that, that leaves 20% left over. And that's a really good goal. I know it's hard to do, but it's a good goal for saving. So that's hard for a lot of people to do, but maybe give yourself a challenge. Try that for 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. We basically all did that in the early days of the pandemic because there was no place to spend money. But give that a try, see how that works. Now, if you're a good saver already, again, it's this balance between current you and future you. So first, congratulations on being a good saver. Second, I want you to make sure you're enjoying the journey along the way and not just building for retirement, because we only get one life, and that's the entire life. And frankly, there's a lot more things we can do with money in our 30s, 40s, and 50s than there is in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I want you to think about, what are the things that you would like to be able to do, and put those into buckets and say, let me give you an example. Let's say you want to learn to surf. You want to learn, give me some other things. Mountain bike riding, you're really into mountain bike riding, and fly fishing. Fly fishing is probably something you can still do in your late 60s and early 70s, right? But mountain bike riding, if you haven't done a lot of it yet, you might want to do that in your 40s before it hurts so much when you fall. So just put things into time buckets and think, what's the ideal age to do this? And if you're married, talk to your spouse about that. If you have a life partner, talk to your life partner and say, what are the things that are really important for us to do? And put them in buckets for the age where it makes the most sense to do that. There's a book called Die with Zero with Bill Perkins, and Bill does a really nice job in his book about talking about that, about how much joy you can get out of money at each stage of your life and how to optimize on that, as opposed to just saving the money. Now, saving's important, and this is the piece for people that save well. The other thing is making sure that your money's working as hard for you as you worked in order to be able to save it. And so I want you to think about making sure it's invested properly. And some of us can do this by ourselves, and others might want to hire a professional, somebody that's a fiduciary to you 100% of the time, that's looking out for your best interest. But it's not enough to just save. It's also important to invest, and getting that asset allocation right. What percent of your stocks, what percent of your portfolio is in stocks, what percent is in bonds, is really, really important. And it's going to drive a large percent of the success of your overall investments. So if you're not a good saver, do what you can to get to 10%. Do what you can to get to 15%. And strive to get to 20%. And hopefully you can get there. If you are a good saver, enjoy the journey and make sure you have a plan and you're investing according to that plan. And you're working with somebody. Nothing that I'm sharing here is financial advice for you, which is why I'm encouraging everybody to deal with somebody that is a fiduciary to them, that is a professional, that knows your situation. But invest, have a plan, and invest according to that plan, and make sure that your money's working hard for you. And on the subject of enjoying the journey, and whether you're saving or you're not saving, I think it's important for all of us to enjoy our journey until retirement, as well as enjoying retirement, which is why I made this video here. 7 things that I want you to think about. Stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy the journey more. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye.